In this video, we are going to have a look at what is the window object. The window object is essentially a global object which is used to represent the current document's browser environment, which means that let's say there is a window of a browser, so you can understand it like a browser tab, and that has a particular DOM document. Right now, the global object representing this window of the DOM document, that is called the window object. Now you can understand that there can be many use cases where this sort of global object, global window object can be used. So for example, storing any data which should be accessible across various pages. That is one use case. Another use case can be something like, let's say various functionalities are there, right? And those functionalities, if there is some global object, then you can attach that, then implicitly that is accessible from everywhere in your in your HTML page, right? Or in your JavaScript also. So for example, we earlier saw that in JavaScript we used to write document something like this, right? Now what is this document? Where is this variable document coming from? Actually, globally, at the root of the you can understand that at the root of the hierarchy, you can understand that there is just one thing which is called window. That's it. And if you print that, then you see that something like this, there is a window object, right? And everything what you see is actually which is accessible globally is basically a a property or function attached to this thing only, this window object. This is the global one, right? So for example, when somebody says document, actually what they are meaning is that they are meaning window.document. So document is just a shortcut for window.document. In fact, you can prove also it by using something like document is equal to window.document. If you simply print this thing, then you will see that this thing gives you true, which means that basically essentially this and this both are basically the same object reference at the in the memory, right? So yeah, and that's why you can see that this thing is true. Apart from that, all the common functionalities, all the common variables which you think that they are global, right? Actually they are here only. So when you say when you simply say set timeout, right, then what is this set timeout? From where this variable has come? Actually this is also an attribute of window, which means that actually set timeout is essentially window.set timeout. So you can see that in window there are a bunch of things, right? And in this only you will see various things which we are using, right? So for example, all the set timeout, set interval, session storage, so all the things which we are using without thinking about that where are they actually, they are actually attached to the global window object. And we earlier saw that in later versions of JavaScript, function called fetch was introduced, right? In fact, fetch is also window.fetch. So any global thing which you are accessing directly, in fact, that is a part of window only. So there are a few more ways to access a global object apart from a window, and that is like self or frames. So you can understand that if I write something like here, uh, self, right, then you can see that this self is also giving me window only. Then why there are two names, window also, self also? Actually the thing is that this self and there is one more name like frames. So these are like used in different contexts. So for example, there is something called web worker API. So inside web workers, the window object is not accessible, but self is accessible. So if you want to write a piece of code which works in a similar manner in browser also and in web workers also, then you can use self. But that will be more helpful when in some later advanced JavaScript setup we are trying to understand web workers. So right now web workers is not our concern, but just that there can be some more variables like self or frames pointing to window. Just I wanted to highlight that so that you can understand that when some names like this come up, then you don't think that it's something new. Okay. Now, this all what we are talking about right now is essentially about browser environment. About browser environment. What about this thing? So you can see Node.js environment. So you can see that in this browser environment, when I print window, I get a window object printed, right? If I run the same script, let's say here, then you can see that we are getting an error that window is not defined. So this window thing is specific to only browsers. Then this window object is not available in Node.js environment. In Node.js environment, there is another similar global object thing, and that thing is called global, right? If you print global, then you get like the same thing which we get same sort of thing like global object which we earlier got in the case of window. Again, you can see that if you simply print global or something here, then you can see that we are not getting this global thing is not defined actually in this part in the browser environment, right? So that is fine. This is specific to Node.js only. Actually, it is used for as we mentioned global object in Node.js environment. If we print console log global, you can see what it is. Again, whatever window is working, so similarly in the same manner, this global is working in Node.js environment. So earlier we saw that set timeout is something is there, right? Actually, in Node.js environment, that thing is actually global dot set timeout, right? Rather than one more thing, there are other functions. All the functions are not available in Node.js environment and browser environment, right? So for example, fetch is only available in browser environment, right? It is not it is a like web API for browsers. It is the fetch is not directly available on Node.js environment, right? And that's why if you do something like fetch, that will not be available. So you can see that if you do something like global dot set timeout, then this is fine. But if you do something like global dot fetch, you will see that you are getting undefined, which means that there is no such function. In fact, and that's why if you directly try to use something, and we saw it earlier also, right? So const resp is equal to let's say something like this. If we try to do, then we will get error, right? Because we will see that fetch is not defined. And we already saw that node fetch is one of the packages using which we can use the same sort of fetch functionality which is available in browser. We can use that same sort of functionality in Node.js environment, but directly fetch is not a feature of directly JavaScript, and that's why that will not be available in Node.js environment. Now there is something called global this. What is the problem? The problem we saw that, yeah, so there is something like global in Node.js environment. There is something like window in browser environment. Can we do something like which is not a which is a common variable, and we can access the global object using the same common variable across all the environments? Can we have something like this? Yes, we have. And in the recent standardizations, the JavaScript ecosystem has come up with this name called global this. And this global this will act as a unified mechanism for accessing the global object, which means that if right now I write let's say global this, then what is going to happen, that you see that I am printing global this in Node.js. When I am running this, then also it is running and it is printing actually the global. And in you can see that in browser environment also it is printing window, which means that automatically it is understanding that in Node.js environment it is global. You can see that it is true, which means that global this is actually is equal to global, and if we run the same code in and obviously this code will be this code. So yeah, so there, like in Webpack, what happens that they will try to, just to avoid errors, they will try to, what they will do that they will try to make this thing, uh, let's say some variable is not defined, and they will try to convert that to some string or something, so that at least error should not come. But if you actually try to test it, then with window object you can clearly see that let's say I give something like this, then obviously this window thing is not available in Node.js environment. But if you see here, then you can see that this thing is giving me true, which means that in browser environment also this global this is working, and this is equal to window. So global this is equal to window in browser environment, and global this is equal to this global object, right, in the Node.js environment. So that should be fine. Now these two things we have seen. Next, again, if we want to have some piece of code which is like environment agnostic, then we can write something like global this dot set timeout. Anyways, we already have a set timeout. So let's say you have some local function, which you should not do, but anyways, let's say you are having a local function called set timeout, and then you want to access the global set timeout, right? That's some other that thing. So that you can access using simply global this dot set timeout, and automatically this piece of code will resolve to global dot set timeout on Node.js environments and window dot set timeout on browser environments. Now, so we are seeing this global object, right? Like in window and global all these things, we are seeing that there is something called, there's some type of object which is a global object, right? And that object always exists in the global scope, and that is what we saw that if we do something like global this dot set timeout or something, that we were getting, because those things, all those variables and those things are available in the global scope. Now let's see something more. Actually, not only we can access the things which are already stored there, we can store our own things inside this global object. So so for example, let's say you do something like a is equal to 10, then actually it will be stored in the browser environment. If you run this code, then this will be stored in window.a. So actually this, whatever the global object, the global object in case of browsers is the window object, and right, and that's why this a will be stored inside the window object. And now you can test that both are the same 10 using a is equal to and this is primitive value, right? Even if you assign some non-primitive value, then also you will get the same thing, which will prove the point that essentially both are the same memory references, right? You can do it something like this. So let's say a is equal to rather than 10, I am putting, let's say, x10. First of all, I have not discussed it maybe earlier, that what do you mean by this simply a is equal to, right? We always said that we could use we could use const, right? We could use let and we could use const. Now the point is that this is the only way you should do, but just since we are discussing here like things like global object and so we are trying to also show you the scenarios which generally you will not use. So for example, using var keyword you should not use, but I'm just showing for the sake of it, and just without any keyword, then also it works actually. But if you don't use any keyword and you declare it and you try to assign any variable for the first time, then automatically it creates which essentially you don't want, right? Let's say you unintentionally typed this variable some variable, let's say abc is there, and instead of abc and already let's say there is an abc variable is there, right? And then you are doing abc is equal to 10, whatever abc was earlier, let's say 5, whatever you are doing, abc is equal to 10. My point is that if you mistype it, let's say instead of abc you write abcc, Actually what happened in this case, that it will not give you error. It will not give you error. You see that I am running this, it is not giving you error, and ABC is still 5, and turns out ABCC is a new variable created, and that is 10. And this is like sometimes bad, you don't want that, right? So actually there is something called strict mode, which we'll see later, that these things what we don't want, this sort of directly assigning to global things, or these things can be avoided, this sort of even by mistake you are doing these things, then this can be avoided, but we'll see that in the next video. For right now I'm just showing you that what is the behavior, and then we'll see that this behavior is not is not, if you want to avoid this sort of behavior, then what to do. Okay, so ABCC is equal to 10. Now which means that if you simply would have done ABC is equal to 10, then also it would have worked, right? Then also it would have worked, right? That is fine. And for simplicity, let's take a simpler name, let's say simply A. It is working fine. But the point is that where is this A? You can see that this is working here also, and this is working here also, in browser also, right? But where is this A? Turns out that this is equal to basically window.a in case of browsers, and window.a in case of browsers. You can see that it is giving us true. But again, if I run this code here, then it will give me error, right? So better that let's take the generic unified variable global this, right? So global this dot a, and now you will see that this works here also, true, which means that in Node.js also, if you simply assign like a is equal to 10, then this a is a new variable created in the global object, right? And that's why it is giving us true, right? So simply a is also fine, a will give you the answer, which is 10. But that is basically is equal to global this dot a is giving us true, which means that it is created in the global scope. And the same thing you'll see that here also you are getting true 10, and it's just that still 10 is created globally, but global this is essentially window in case of browser environment, right? Okay, so this is what one of the points, that in a web browser, when scripts create global variables like this, you can create in many ways. Actually, if you don't write, then also it is a global variable. But there is another way also where you could write var keyword, right? And then also, if you see that then in web browser, it is created, right? So you can see that there is a scope. So you can see that, let's say window.a and a. Obviously this will not be available in the thing, right? But you can see that right now also it is created in the using the var keyword also it is created. But let me see. So let's run this piece of code directly here. You see, let's run this piece of code directly here. You see that a is 10, and window.a is also 10, right? Let's write this piece of code, which is something like yeah. So you can see that both are coming. And if I write, let's say here, instead of this I write, let's say x10 or something, right? And if it will give me the reference same, which means that this proves the point that both are same, right? Let's write this thing. So let's clear this, let's write this. You can see that a is x10, window.a is x10, and a is equal to window.a is giving us true, which means that when you created using var, then also it got created in the global window, right? That is one thing. Second thing is that if you do the same thing here, then obviously it will give error because window is not defined. But if you do global this, turns out then also it will not work in case of Node.js. So you can see that in this case, in case of Node.js, A is your X10, but that A is not created in global this, right? It is not added global this, but it is still accessible. You can see that you are signed and it is accessible globally in this script. That is fine, but it is not added to the global object. And that's why when you do A is equal to obviously this will be false because this is object, this is undefined, right? This is one thing. Second thing is that when I was trying to do this, on on using Webpack, using Webpack, then you can see that something like this is coming. You understand? Just now I showed you that that A was X10 and window.a was also X10. But using Webpack, when I'm running this, and this thing is running using Webpack dev server, you can see. Then using Webpack, when I'm running this, then you can see that this is giving me X10 and undefined, even in the window, right? Even in the window, why it is happening? It turns out that there's a particular type of mode, which is called strict mode, and that strict mode is by default enabled on Webpack, and that's why this sort of thing, which is like creating things globally automatically, that thing is disabled by default in automatic in Webpack. And that's why I showed you that if you do this in Webpack, then you are getting X10 undefined false, but if you do this manually then you get this thing, right? But when I'm typing the code myself in the console, then the strict mode is not enabled, but Webpack is having that. That's why it is happening. Anyways, this is actually the behavior which you should be having, and in general this is the Webpack, what it is doing, that is the behavior you should be having. But I'm just showing you that by default, if you don't have any strict mode or something, then what happens, right? In web browser, when scripts create global variables defined with the var keyword, they are created as members of the global object, and you can write it that they are created as members of the global object when strict mode is not enabled. When strict mode is enabled, then this is not created. But even if strict mode is not enabled, but then also in Node.js this is not the case, as we saw that in this case right now. Even this thing is right now not strict mode. We'll discuss in a later video that how to enable script mode, but right now just take my word for it that right now strict mode is not enabled, and then also you are getting this undefined, which means that for for a strict mode not enabled, the var keyword has a different behavior on Node.js and browsers, right? Okay, so that should be fine. That is what I am trying to show here, that if you are using global object and non-strict mode, then you are saying that A is equal to 10. So earlier we saw that everything was fine, right? Earlier we saw that let me see. Yeah, so earlier we saw that whether this is var A is equal to 10 or A is equal to 10, in both cases, if script mode is strict mode is not enabled, and in both cases 10 true 10 true was coming, right? Why? Because this A was created in the global scope, right? Both case 10 true. Actually in Node.js environment, you can see that when you are not using var keyword, then it is created. So if you are not using var keyword, then it is fine, then it is created in the global scope, and that's why 10 true is fine. But if you are using var keyword, then the behavior is different. It is not created in the global scope, and that's why it is false, right? And in strict mode, obviously it will be false everywhere. Again, too much jargon, directly assigning just without any keyword, or using keyword var, all these you don't have to use ever. You should not ever use this type of code. I'm just mentioning this because when I'm discussing global object and the behavior of global object, you should be aware that something like this happens. But so that if inadvertently some bug happens, then then let's say you forgot this some keyword, right? Inadvertently this thing is happening, then you should be aware of it, but intentionally you should never use syntax like this. And if you use strict mode, then automatically this type of code will give you error also. Okay, so that is fine. One more thing, this right now whatever we are talking about, this global like var keyword, right? Actually we saw that when you are using let or const, those are block scoped, right? But this var keyword, we don't have to use it, but just since I'm mentioning it here right now, just let me tell you that this var keyword, if you create a variables using var keyword, then that is a function scoped variable. So there is nothing called block scoped for var keywords. The function, the block scoped variables were introduced with let and const until ES5, which was the earlier version. Var keyword is function block scope. What is function? What function scope? What is function scope? Function scope is that if you create, let's say, if or something inside it, then the scope does not change. The scope is for the entire function. Okay, not for the block. So if you remember earlier that in case of let, if you have something like if or some condition, let's say x less than 20 or whatever, if this something is there, and then you create x is equal to, let's say, 10 or 20, right? Then if you print x here, then it is fine, but if you print x here, then it was not working. So let's take a simple condition, let's say true, right? So which means that this will always be executed, right? That is fine. But let's comment this for now, and let's keep everything in a function. So let's define that function. So let's say function foo, and inside that function you are writing this piece of code and calling the function foo. Now if you run this piece of code, then you are getting 10. That is fine. What will happen when I run this thing? You see that you are getting x is not defined, and that is what I was saying, that this, since this is a let variable, that's why this is happening, right? Had it been var variable, then you can see that both are 10, which means that as soon as you declared a variable, this variable var variable is not declared for this block, but there's no meaning of block scoped for var keyword. Var variables are for function block or the whole script block, which whole script or function block, which means that this function is having this var, as simple as that. Okay, this function is having this var, so even if it is declared inside this block, this is able to access that. So yeah, and yeah, so this is like x, but what happens when this is let, and this is x is not defined, but what if x was defined? Yeah, x was defined. So let's say let x is equal to 20. So you can clearly see that in this case this thing is 10, right? This thing is 10, but this thing is 20. This thing is 20 because now this x is not taking this x, this is taking this outer x, right? But had this been, let's say, var, then again the new variable which you created, it has it has function scope, and that's why this x and this x are basically the same, and that's why this x is still pointing to this x, and that's why this is 10 rather than 10 20. Okay, so that is what I'm mentioning here. So let's say outer there is some variable 10, and then inside you are creating 20, then your a is essentially 20, but window.a is 10. So from here, if you want to access the outer variable, then you know that this is a global window object it has in non-strict mode. then you can access that using 10 using window.a also, right? But otherwise, because of this variable shadowing concept which we earlier saw, if we have shadowed a variable, then directly there is no point, there is no way of accessing a. In this case you can access it, right? Because this is a global thing. So that will be all for now. That is what you saw, that how we can what is the purpose and semantics and the behavior of window and global objects and all. In the next video, I believe we are going to discuss about strict mode. So yeah, that's all for now. Thanks.